The night I ended my marriage, I did it in front of 50 people and a cake with her name on it. The music was still playing, champagne glasses still half full, and every face in the room was frozen somewhere between a smile and a gasp. I had planned every detail down to the second, not because I enjoyed the drama, but because I needed her to see herself through my eyes one last time. For weeks, I had been smiling through my teeth, rehearsing the perfect birthday speech. I kept it light at work, laughed at her texts, kissed her cheek when she left for her so-called meetings. On the surface, I was the doting husband planning a milestone celebration. Underneath, I was a man waiting for the right moment to drop the truth like a blade between us. It started small. A few late nights she couldn't explain without tripping over her own words. A coworker's name that kept slipping into her stories. The way she would tilt her phone away when a message popped up. I told myself I was being paranoid, but something in me had already started counting down. Then one night, I saw her car parked outside a dim little wine bar halfway across town. She was inside, leaning across the table toward him, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in years. I didn't confront her then. I walked back to my car and sat in the dark for almost an hour, letting the hum of the streetlights drown out the pounding in my chest. That was the moment I knew this wouldn't just fade away. The final crack came weeks later. She told me she was pregnant. I should have felt joy, but my stomach turned to stone. The timing didn't add up. My mind kept looping back to that wine bar, to the way his hand brushed hers without hesitation. I didn't accuse her outright. Instead, I went quiet and made an appointment. 2 weeks later, the results were in my hands. The child wasn't mine. I wish I could say I cried, or that I broke down and begged her to tell me the truth, but what I felt was colder than grief. It was resolve. I decided she wasn't going to get a private breakup. She was going to get the kind of ending you don't come back from, the kind people still whisper about years later. The night of the party, I stood by the door as guests arrived, shaking hands and smiling like the perfect host. She floated through the crowd in a deep red dress, her laughter bouncing off the walls. The air smelled of roses and vanilla frosting, but beneath it was the metallic edge of anticipation. I had slipped the manila envelope into my jacket pocket hours before, its weight against my chest a constant reminder of what was coming. When the lights dimmed and everyone gathered for the cake, I stepped forward with it in my hands. The candles flickered across her face, catching the shimmer of her lipstick. I started my speech the way any husband would, stories from our first date, the way she changed my life, the milestones we'd shared. Her eyes shone, and she reached for my hand. I let her hold it, because I wanted her to feel safe one last time. Then I told them there was another milestone tonight. The room leaned in, waiting. I pulled the envelope from my jacket, the paper crackling in the silence. I told her I knew about him, about the nights she wasn't where she said she was, about the life she had built on lies. The paternity test slipped free, its bold black letters speaking louder than I ever could. She went pale, her hand falling away from mine. Around us, whispers turned into a low rumble. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes shifting between us. I didn't raise my voice, but every word hit like a hammer. By the time I finished, no one was smiling. The candles had burned halfway down, wax dripping into the frosting. And in that moment, I knew the night had only just begun. She didn't speak at first. Her mouth opened like she might try, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for someone to step in, to save her, to change the subject. No one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the muffled music still playing from someone's phone in the corner. Her mother was the first to break the silence. She stepped forward, her voice trembling, asking what I was talking about. I kept my eyes on my wife as I explained. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The facts were enough. The man's name. The dates. The location of the wine bar. The night I watched them through the window. And finally, the results of the test. Every word seemed to strip another layer of color from her face. She tried to interrupt once, saying it wasn't how it looked, but I didn't let her spin it. I had spent too long swallowing half-truths and gaslighting. This was my moment to reclaim the narrative, and I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of it. A few people looked like they wanted to leave, but they stayed rooted to the spot. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe they wanted to see if she'd admit it. My brother-in-law shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. I could see in his posture that he already knew, or at least suspected. That stung more than I expected. When I finally stopped speaking, the silence pressed in like a heavy blanket. She glanced toward the doorway, like she might run. I stepped aside, making it clear she could go if she wanted. I wasn't holding her here. She straightened her shoulders and looked at me with something between rage and desperation. "You don't have to do this," she said. Her voice cracked, and I knew she was trying to pull at the part of me that still remembered loving her. I kept my hands at my sides, the envelope still dangling from my fingers. I told her I already had. The reaction rippled through the room, a few gasps, someone whispering "Oh my God," a wine glass clinking against a table. My best friend Mark stepped closer, putting himself slightly between us, not in a protective way, but in case things got physical. They wouldn't. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of making this ugly in that way. She finally turned and walked toward the door. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, each step sounding sharper than the last. At the threshold, she paused, half turning like she wanted to make some kind of final statement. Nothing came. She just left, the door swinging shut behind her. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds longer, then the murmuring started. People asking each other if they had known, wondering how long it had been going on. Some avoided looking at me, as if making eye contact might make them complicit. I didn't care. I wasn't here to manage their discomfort. Her father approached me, his face grim. He didn't defend her. He didn't ask me to take it back. All he said was, "I'm sorry," and he walked away before I could respond. That hit harder than I expected, because it confirmed that at least one person in her family understood. Mark asked if I was okay. I told him I would be. It was the closest thing to the truth I could give. The truth was, I didn't feel anything yet. No relief, no triumph, no heartbreak. Just emptiness. The night wasn't over, but the marriage was, and that realization sat in my chest like a stone. When the last guest finally left, I blew out the candles on the half-melted cake. The smell of smoke and sugar lingered in the air. The house felt too big, too quiet. I picked up the manila envelope from the table and slid it back into my jacket. I didn't know what I would do with it now. Maybe keep it. Maybe burn it. What I did know was that tomorrow would come, and with it, the first morning in years where I didn't have to wonder what she was hiding. She called the next morning. I didn't pick up. The phone buzzed again, then again, until I turned it face down on the counter. I poured coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the steam curling into the air. The silence felt different now. It wasn't peaceful, not yet, but it was mine. By midday, she had sent a string of messages. Some were apologies, some were accusations. One told me I had humiliated her, another swore that the baby could still be mine. I didn't answer a single one. Every vibration of the phone was just another reminder that last night hadn't been a dream. Around 3 in the afternoon, her brother showed up at my door. He looked like he hadn't slept. He asked if we could talk. I let him in, mostly because I wanted to see if he'd finally admit what I suspected. He sat at the edge of the couch and told me he had known about the coworker for months. He claimed he tried to get her to end it, but she wouldn't listen. That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Not because I expected loyalty from him, but because it confirmed that I had been the last to know in my own marriage. I told him there was nothing left to discuss, and I walked him to the door. The next day, my mother called. Word had traveled fast. She asked if I was okay in that careful tone that mothers use when they already know the answer. I told her I was fine, even though my chest felt like someone had wrapped it in wire. She offered to come over. I said no. I didn't want comfort. I wanted space. By the end of the week, the whispers had reached my job. Co-workers stopped by my desk under the guise of asking work questions, but I could see it in their eyes. They were waiting for me to bring it up. I never did. If they wanted the story, they could get it the same way everyone else had, in full view, with nothing left to guess at. One night, Mark came over with a bottle of bourbon. We sat on the porch, the air heavy with the smell of rain. He didn't press me to talk, just poured 2 glasses and waited. Eventually, I told him about the first time I suspected her. About the wine bar. About the test. Saying it out loud felt strange, like reading a police report about my own life. He asked if I thought I could ever forgive her. I laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the kind that comes from somewhere deep and tired. I told him forgiveness wasn't even on the table. I could barely stand to think about her without my blood pressure spiking. She had built a life on my trust, and then she had taken a match to it. By the second week, her messages had changed. She wasn't angry anymore. She was pleading. She wanted to meet in person. She wanted to explain. She wanted me to remember the good years. I didn't reply. I knew if I saw her, she'd find a way to twist the truth until I started questioning myself again. That was how she worked. The turning point came when she sent a long message saying she still wanted me in the baby's life, even if it wasn't mine biologically. That was the first time in days I felt something other than numbness. It was rage. The kind that makes your vision sharpen. I sent one reply. I told her to never contact me again, about the child or anything else. After that, the silence settled in for good. I deleted her number, blocked her on everything, and tucked the manila envelope into the back of my closet. I didn't need it anymore. The truth had already done its job. A month passed before I realized I had stopped checking the driveway for her car. The first week after the party, every sound outside had me glancing toward the window, half expecting her to show up uninvited. Now, the only visitors were the mailman and the occasional neighbor waving as they walked their dog. Life began to take on a different rhythm. I woke up early, cooked for one, and kept the TV off most nights. The quiet that used to feel suffocating now gave me space to breathe. I started going to the gym again, not because I was chasing some big transformation, but because I needed to feel like I was moving forward. Her absence was noticeable in strange ways. The laundry pile was smaller. The wine glasses stayed in the cabinet. The phone charger by the couch stayed plugged in. It was these little things that made me realize how much of my life had been shared with someone who wasn't really there for me. People still brought her up. A friend from college texted me saying he'd heard about what happened. A cousin sent a message about seeing her in town with the same men from the wine bar. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I had all the answers that mattered. One Saturday, I pulled the manila envelope out of the closet. I sat on the edge of the bed, the paper warm from the afternoon sun streaming through the window. I opened it, read the test results one last time, then placed everything back inside. This time, I didn't shove it to the back. I carried it to the fireplace. The paper curled and blackened in seconds, the ashes rising and falling before settling into nothing. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't forgetting. It was finality. Mark invited me out to a bar that night. At first, I hesitated, but then I realized staying home wasn't protecting me from anything. I met him there, and for the first time in months, I felt present. We laughed, talked about work, and even made plans to take a trip later in the year. The conversation wasn't about her, and that felt like progress. As I walked home, the night air cool on my face, I thought about how differently things could have gone. I could have confronted her quietly, let her spin the story to make me the villain. I could have stayed, convincing myself it was better to raise a child who wasn't mine than face the truth. But I didn't. I ended it on my terms, in front of everyone, with nothing left to hide. Some people might call it cruel. Maybe it was. But it was also honest, and that honesty was the first thing I had truly owned in years. Back at home, I stood in the doorway for a long time before going in. The house was still, the only sound the faint hum of the fridge. I realized then that this stillness was not loneliness. It was freedom. And for the first time since the night of the party, I smiled. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be moments when the memories would come back sharp and unexpected. But they would fade, like the ashes in the fireplace, and I would keep walking forward. Because no matter what she took from me, she couldn't take that.